of the threats to wildlife that we highlighted in previous videos was the threat from wildlife crime. In this video, we're going to look at the types of wildlife crime, their effects on our wildlife, the laws we have in place to protect them, plus how we go about recognising and reporting wildlife crime. So first, what exactly is wildlife crime? Well, it's defined as the illegal disturbance, destruction, theft or sale of plants and animals. Some different types of wildlife crime include poaching, such as game, venison or fish, the killing of protected species using explosives, snares or poisoning, damaging the breeding or resting places of protected species, for example damaging an osprey's nest or digging a badger set, and illegally trading in endangered species such as selling ivory tusks from elephants. Wildlife crime such as this can happen intentionally, for example where hare coursing or badger baiting is considered a sport by some, or to make money from selling parts of endangered species or betting on animal fights. However, wildlife crime can also happen unintentionally in the course of agriculture, development or forestry operations, where the proper procedures for identifying and protecting wildlife have not been carried out. This might include driving large machinery over a badger set and collapsing it, or destroying a bat roost in the course of building work. Some of these unintentional acts could be described as reckless. When you think of wildlife crime, you might think of it happening at night, out in the countryside, but it also happens in our towns and cities and even in broad daylight. It's also worth noting that whilst some activities such as snaring may be legal, they can be carried out in the wrong way and that could make them illegal. This is true for snaring in Scotland that, although legal, has strict protocols around where and how to set snares, who can set them and how regularly they need to be checked. Failing to comply with these conditions could result in someone committing a crime. Wildlife crime causes a range of problems in our society, so it needs to be taken seriously. It may be one of the pressures that can push a plant or animal species closer to extinction. It may cause unnecessary pain and suffering to wildlife and even domestic animals such as dogs who are involved in animal fighting. Wildlife crime can also be linked to other serious and organised crime like drugs, money laundering, and firearms offences. In Scotland, we have special laws in place to protect our wildlife. This includes the Wildlife and Countryside Act, the Wildlife and Natural Environment Act, and for badgers, the Protection of Badgers Act. It's normally the job of the police to investigate wildlife crimes and to pass details on to the Procurator Fiscal, who will decide if there is sufficient evidence to go to court. Police Scotland has a network of trained wildlife crime liaison officers. However, any officer can attend and investigate a wildlife crime. In Scotland, the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or SPCA, also have investigatory powers in relation to domestic animals such as dogs, or in cases where there are welfare issues for live wildlife, such as a badger caught in a snare. Now, I'm going to pass over to Lindsay, who's going to show you some items related to wildlife crime and give you some tips for recognising wildlife crime while out and about.
So, I've set up some wildlife crime scene scenarios that you might come across in the wild. In some instances, the use of traps, snares, cages and poisons is an effective way for farmers, gamekeepers and conservationists to manage pests and predators. But it is important to know what to look out for and what is considered legal or illegal. So let's take a closer look at some common practices. There are many different types of traps, and some are outdated and illegal. A mouse trap like this is frequently used in farms and houses. A spring trap is kind of like a big mouse trap. It's really important that these are put in the proper places. It can't, for instance, be on the top of a fence post in case it would catch a bird of prey. Cage traps have bait inside them. The animal goes into the trap and the door closes behind it. These are great for catching small mammals for studies. Here is a trap I found. Do you think it might be illegally set? If proper rules are followed, no harm will come to the animal and they can be safely released. It's not great that there's no water or bedding in this trap. And also, it's been here for more than a day, so this would be a cause for concern. If we imagine we've been walking and we've come across this snare. A snare is a noose set to catch perhaps a rabbit or a fox. And in this case, it'll hold it around its leg but not kill it. But is this a legal or an illegal snare? Something to consider about snaring is that it is actually a legal practice as long as they follow strict rules. It must be checked once a day. They cannot snare an animal protected under Schedule 6 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. So that's things like badgers, otters, hedgehogs, or even pine martens. It then becomes very important of the placement of the snare. It shouldn't be partially suspended, perhaps from a fence or a tree, because that'll cause suffering. It can't be near any animal runs in case it catches any of these protected species, and it can't be where people walk their dogs. Even a fence line like this, it could become entangled. These rules include having a stopper on it so that when it tightens, it can't get too tight around the leg or wherever it's caught onto. A free-running snare doesn't self-lock. It relaxes when the animal stops pulling. If an animal gets its leg trapped in here, it will tighten and tighten and tighten. It doesn't have a stopper on it, which will cause unnecessary harm to the animal. The snare must also be attached firmly to an anchor. This isn't. Also, this snare has been put on a badger path. So there's a good chance that a badger will get stuck in here. So if you find a trap or a snare that is unlawfully set, it is important to phone the police straight away by telephoning 101. Do not interfere with the trap in any way, as this is in itself illegal. So on to our next scenario. I found this strange scene in the woods here. At first glance, it just looks like there's some litter being dropped, but let's take a closer look. So as we approach, I can see lots of drink cans. Oh, there's even some chips. What's that down there? It's kind of like a square has been dug out. Now, if I look round where I am, I'm in the woodlands. There's a spade. Now if I walk over here... Oh, look what we've found. Can you see that this is actually the top of a badger set? You can see the spoil heaps right here, where badgers excavate in the soil and make their homes. This scene is looking very suspect. We should start to look for evidence. A closer look, there's something being dropped. Now I don't want to touch it because there'll be DNA evidence on this. If we're lucky, there might even be some photos of the crime on this phone. And we've got a glove too. I wonder if there's fingerprints on that spade. Look at this big muddy footprint with some dog footprints too. This may be what's left of the horrendous blood sport badger baiting, where badger sets are dug and dogs are made to fight the badgers for sport. All of this is evidence for the police. They'll be able to use DNA from drinks cans or even fingerprints from phones and spades. Again, if you see anything like this, the most important thing to do is record what you've seen with some photos and phone the police on 101. So our last scenario shows a bird carcass. Maybe this doesn't look too suspicious on first looking, but if we take a closer look, we can actually make out some blue pellets. If you come across this, it might be a sign that poison bait has been left. This again is illegal. There is a high likelihood that non-target animals could eat this. It's even dangerous to domestic animals or children. Please be very careful if you see anything like this. Take pictures and again phone 101.
If you see something that you think might be suspicious, the first priority is your own safety. If the crime is in progress, for example, if you see someone digging out a badger set, do not approach them and instead retreat to a safe place and call 999, reporting a live crime. If what you find looks like it happened a while ago, or there was no one actually on scene committing the crime, you can report this to Police Scotland by dialling 101. You can ask for the incident number to keep informed on the progress, and you can ask for details to be passed on to the local wildlife crime liaison officer. The investigation of wildlife crime can be tricky, as the criminals are often not caught in the act and any evidence left can be destroyed or deteriorate quickly in the outdoor environment. Investigators need to work extra hard to gather sufficient evidence, and they often draw on the services of a range of experts. Ecologists may have a role to play as an expert witness. For example, in a badger baiting case, they may prove that the burrow that was dug out was a badger set. Forensics also plays a part. A forensic veterinary pathologist may be called in to confirm the cause of death or injury to a wild animal. Forensic experts can also help in linking a suspect to a wildlife crime scene by obtaining fingerprints from tools left at the scene, DNA analysis of dog saliva left on the wild animals, or even soil or traces of blood on spades found in the suspect's vehicle. Digital forensics is playing an increasing role in tackling wildlife crime by examining the suspect's phone footage and social media accounts. Wildlife crime investigation really is a fascinating field. Now we're going to test out your wildlife CSI skills. We've had a report that badger baiters have dug badgers out of their set to fight their dogs. But who did it? And was it definitely badgers that they attacked? Your mission is to collect the human and wildlife evidence from the crime scene to help solve the crime. There are 4 pieces of evidence to collect. First up, the perpetrators have left a critical piece of evidence linking them to the crime scene. You'll need to bag this up and send it away for forensic analysis to extract the DNA. But what is it? Secondly, you found several clumps of fur at the crime scene. They were black and white, coarse, and did not roll easily between your fingers. As the expert mammal witness, you need to identify what animal they came from. Now, can you prove who was using the underground burrows? You look closer and spot these fresh footprints going in and out of an entrance. They have a kidney-shaped palm pad with 5 toes sitting in an arc above the palm pad. But who made them? Next, you notice a small pit beside one of the animal entrances. It contains fresh droppings. They have a slight chemical smell and vary in consistency from firm and sausage-shaped to wet and sloppy. But who do they belong to? If you've spotted the glove in the first photo and were able to identify the field signs as badger, then you've passed our wildlife CSI quiz. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do keep an eye out for anything suspicious and report to the relevant authorities as advised.